Hi, I'm Einar Tangen, and this is Reality Check. As we look forward to Japan's future role in the emerging world order, we need to understand Japan's history. What influenced its longest-serving prime minister? Japan's history. From a feudal society ruled by competing warlords, Japan was put on its modern trajectory by U.S. gunboats, which in 1854 forced Japan to open its economy to the West. The humiliation led to the restoration of the emperor in 1868 and the beginning of the Meiji period, which lasted until 1912. During this period, Japan rapidly adopted Western political ideas, industrialization, and modernization. But as Japan rose, it adopted not only industrialization and modernization, but also the colonial ideas of its Western teachers. Between the late 1800s until 1945, Japan engaged in a series of armed adventures. Militarism, based on fascist ideas about Japan's innate racial and technological superiority, resulted in wars with China, Russia, Korea, and eventually the United States. The Japanese annexations in China, Russia, and Korea had revealed what life under imperialism was like. Japan systematically eradicated the language, culture, and identity of any areas under its control. Schools and universities were forbidden to teach or speak their native languages. In Korea, for example, 200,000 Korean historical documents were burned, erasing the country's intellectual memory. All were told to forget their past and simply pledge their allegiance and labor to the emperor. For 7 years after its surrender, Japan was ruled under military occupation as General MacArthur plotted his conquest of China and Russia as a means of eradicating socialism and communism. In 1947, the U.S., in essence, forced Japan to adopt a constitution with a bicameral legislature headed by the emperor. Unlike Germany, Japan was not forced to come to terms with its war crimes. While a few Class A war criminals were tried and punished, others, like Shinzo Abe's maternal grandfather, Nobusuke Kishi, while imprisoned, were never tried or fully punished for the atrocities they committed. Instead, he, like others, were released to create the Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, an American proxy against socialism and communism. The LDP went on to dominate Japanese politics after World War II until present times. This has left a bitter legacy in China, Russia, and the Koreas, as well as other Southeast Asian nations who suffered under the years of Japanese aggression. A bitterness magnified as Shinzo Abe and his allies set about revising history by minimizing Japan's actions, rewriting school textbooks, to cast Japan as a benign country who sought only to bring order to its chaotic Asian neighbors. Abe's refusal to fully acknowledge or take responsibility for Japan's past atrocities remains an issue even today. For the comfort women, forced laborers, and the families of those who were killed. Since World War II, due to the U.S. Marshall Plan, Japan was able to rapidly rebuild its economy. But Japan's economic resurgence was curtailed when it was forced to sign the Plaza Accord in 1985 by the United States. Since then, Japan's economy, while number 3 in the world, has moved sideways. Historically, the brief recitation I have given makes it abundantly clear that Japan's historic adversary was and continues to be the United States. This has left only two logical choices for Japan: continue to be occupied and dominated by the US, or find a new path. Shinzo Abe. Shinzo Abe grew up heavily influenced by his paternal grandfather, who he saw simply as a defeated victim of the United States. His dream was to reclaim the honor of his grandfather and Japan as an independent nation by taking control of its national security, revising its history, and then asserting its economic independence. This meant logically amending the Constitution imposed by the US, finding a way to break the economic chains of the Plaza Accord imposed by the US, and removing US troops from Japanese soil. Indications of his desire to accomplish this: in 2017, he scrapped the 1% GDP defense spending cap. In 2018, he proposed that Article 9 of the Constitution, the pacifist clause, in which Japan renounced war and the maintenance of war potential. He refused to take responsibility for past Japanese atrocities. He visited the Yasukuni Shrine, where the remains of Japanese war criminals had been moved years after Japan's surrender. He had school textbooks rewritten to say that Japan was in fact a noble defender of Asia that had tried to save its neighbors from the aggressive colonialization of foreign powers. So, while the man was assassinated, his ideas live on. While the new Prime Minister, Kishida, is not known to favor it, all indications are that the LDP party as a whole supports and has the votes now to pass the constitutional amendment to Article 9. Ironically, due mostly to Abe's assassination and the groundswell of sympathy votes that gave the LDP the representatives it needed in its upper house. As the emerging multipolar order starts to take form, one thing is clear: Japan still needs an enemy to justify removing the pacifist clause. The DPRK alone is not enough. But the US desire to contain a rising China is. But one wonders if Washington has thought through the logical implications of Japan's trajectory. A Japan with a capable military of its own, possibly even nuclear, will no longer need a US security umbrella, at which point it is probable that the world's third largest economy will ask the US troops to leave, while it pursues its own independent economic future. The memory of ancient civilization states are not counted in decades and hundreds of years, as in the West, but in hundreds and thousands of years. In looking at the future of Asia and the part countries like Japan will play in the emerging world order, you must look to the past to understand the trajectory and the future.